Jay here for Stretford Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, I'm live, I'm in the studio. So get involved in the chat in the comments. Going to be talking about all the latest Manchester United news. There's a few stories to get through, a lot of them focusing on this upcoming game at the weekend against some team called Liverpool or something. So we'll be getting into that. We'll also be talking about a couple of articles that are doing the rounds as well. There's a good article in The Athletic about Brian Mbeumo, so we'll get into that. Plus, we'll be talking about the goalkeeper situation and one or two other bits and pieces as well. Just trying to sort of analyse. I think there's a few articles trying to analyse just where United are at the minute. It's a weird situation we find ourselves in because in some respects, there's a lot that isn't good enough, and in some respects, there's sort of green shoots of improvement. I know on the whole the season hasn't been good enough, but we'll just get into that because it depends on your perspective. Are you a glass half full kind of person or glass half empty? So yeah, get involved in the chat in the comments and make sure you're hitting that like button. Good to see Mick Holloway, Notch, Darren Davids, Ron C, everyone there. Right, let's talk about this article in the Beeb. Talking about what the next, or why Man United's next 4 games could shape their season. So United have obviously got some big games coming up. We've got, is it Liverpool at the weekend? Then I think it's Brighton. Then it's Forest. And then is it Spurs? I think. So there's tough games there. There's no sugarcoating it. I mean, every game in the Premier League, I know it's cliche, but every game is quite tough. So these games could. I know it feels like we say this every month with Ruben Amorim. But these games could have a big part to play in his future. I think if he was to get any form of result at Anfield, then that would give him a massive boost and also probably sort of alleviate some of the pressure that he's under. However, if it didn't go his way at Anfield and for whatever reason we couldn't get a result against Brighton at home, then you've got tricky away fixtures, then there might be more sort of questions around the future. And I don't know, worst case scenario, right? Allow me, worst case scenario, if he was to lose all those games, would that be it? Would he be sacked? Possibly. If he was to win all those, though, maybe then he gets some time where you can stop going, this is it, this is the crunch time, this is it, this is the must-win game. And you go, actually, he's bought himself at least to the end of the season. Because Jim Ratcliffe, when he was talking about it the other week, he was saying, oh, you know, it'll take 3 years. But a lot of the money he's on, Jim Ratcliffe wants to give him at least the end of the season, sorry. This whole 3 years thing, that's all well and good. But if United was to finish 15th again, is Ruben Amorim going to get a third season? No. However, I think the sort of the most of the stories, most of the noise, most of the news we're hearing is that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Omar Brada and Jason Wilcox, they all want to give Ruben Amorim at least the end of the season. That only happens barring a complete disaster, and losing those 4 games would be a disaster. However, if you were to say win 2 of them, I think you'd be okay. Let me know what you think. Anyway, this article here says Ruben Amorim should be looking ahead to Manchester United's return to Premier League action this weekend with a renewed sense of optimism. Yet 4 huge games now await United. Starting at Liverpool, they could shape how this season turns out for the team, for better or worse. Amorim's side produced one of their most solid performances, or one of the most solid performances of his time in charge, by beating Sunderland 2-0 immediately before the international break. The result eased pressure that had been mounting on the Portuguese head coach in the aftermath of a woeful defeat at Brentford the week before. Since then, it references the article, or the interview, sorry, that I was talking about. Minority owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe has backed Amorim, talking in terms of it taking 3 years for the former Sporting coach to make his mark at Old Trafford, and reminding supporters how long it took Sir Alex Ferguson to navigate choppy waters following his arrival at the club in '86. However, Amorim knows few will take Ratcliffe's word at face value. If the team failed to make meaningful progress on last season's 15th place, United's worst top-flight finish since the 73-74 relegation season. So it's pretty much what I've been saying there. And then he sort of says, in theory, it is a good chance to pick up a decent points haul and push up the table towards European places. In the dressing room and the boardroom, this is United's stated aim this season and will prove progress has been made. Look, you have to, I know it's a massive cliche, you have to take each game as it comes, especially when the way things are at Manchester United. We can't go looking ahead to Brighton and to Spurs and to Forest. You certainly can't do that when you've got a game against Liverpool. You have to focus on that game and see where we're at after that game. Now, I said a few weeks ago, I said, when there was talk, maybe Ruben Amorim was going to get sacked, I said, I expect them to take some sort of stock after the Liverpool game. Now, the fact that he beat Sunderland was huge. It was. People go, it's only Sunderland. If you'd have lost to a newly promoted side at Old Trafford, the knives would have been out. They would have been. It would have been like disastrous. There's certain games where I feel like Ruben Amorim needed a win. One was the Burnley game. I think that came on the back of the Grimsby game, didn't it? And he's like, Burnley at home, again a newly promoted side. He'd just been knocked out of Carabao. Need a result. I'm pretty sure that was the timeline. The Sunderland one was another one following the Brentford loss. It's like, look, we've got to get our act together. There's no excuses here. And to be fair, we turned up, and I agree with what Simon Stone is saying now. That was probably United's most comfortable performance since Ruben Amorim took over. And it's easy to dismiss Sunderland because they're newly promoted, but they have been doing quite well in the Premier League this season. So you can't be too harsh on Ruben Amorim. I think you've got to have this stage where you can give him credit for decent performances and you criticise him for bad ones. I think you can do that. I think that's fair. So these next 4 games could prove pivotal. We'll have to wait and see. I know we say this a lot, but it does feel like this is a manager who's still trying to get to the place where he's not under loads of pressure, where he can sort of start relaxing a little bit. I don't think we're quite there yet. But a result at Anfield, even a draw, could help to do that. Let me know what you think. James Richard Johnson says, get Jurgen Klopp as Man United manager. Don't see that. Mick Hollahan says, Michael Oliver is the ref. We are screwed. I'm going to get to that in a little while. Don't you worry about that. Back-to-back wins needed, says Ron C. Yep, I agree with that. It is a bit of a joke that we haven't had back-to-back wins in the Premier League under Ruben Amorim. I know we're unlikely to get them now with the next game being at Anfield, but we do need that. We need that because it's just ridiculous. Feel sorry for Frank and his Barnet. I don't think there's any sign of him cutting that in the near future. Waiting for 5. Chris Smith says, smash a like if you hate the Scousers. Morning, Jay. Unfortunately, both teams only playing good enough for a draw, says Ron C. Santa Knox says, not so much about how good the opera. It needs to be about how we do the right things against whoever. Barry Scarborough says, our standard has really dropped and we think these 4 games are difficult. Yes, you could argue that our standard has dropped, which it has. I said this earlier on in the season when Roy Keane was having a dig about how the bar has been lowered at United following the Arsenal game, and I think it was a fair point because it has been. We're talking about Ruben Amorim keeping his job even if he finishes 7th or even 8th. Can you imagine any other Manchester United manager post Alex Ferguson being afforded that? No. Yeah, this is where we're at. So, yes, the bar has been lowered. But also, I think to be fair, Liverpool's obviously a difficult game. Brighton, they have got, I think, a fairly decent record at Old Trafford over the last few years. Forest, who've been poor under Ange Postecoglou, but did very well last season. And Spurs is always a tricky one. And our record against Spurs last season was just unbelievably bad. To lose 4 times to Spurs is shocking and indefensible. I know Ruben Amorim wasn't around for all of those games. I think one of them came under Eric Ten Hag's tenure, but the players should be ashamed of themselves because that is, quite frankly, the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Let's talk about XG stats. So what expected goals tell us about the Premier League start or the starts of the Premier League this season? Now, this is the funny thing with this, because if you go scroll down, there's a little graphic here. So it shows you there XG. So you can see there, great attack, great defence. City have got a good attack and a good defence. Arsenal, pretty much the same, not there, not quite as good as City's. I think there you can see that United have a good attack, but the defence isn't too clever. And I think if you scroll up, there is, it says here, scroll down a little bit. It says Manchester United and Chelsea have one of the top 5 attacks in the league, but worryingly also rank in the bottom 5 defensively. So that's why United are sort of mid-table, is because we're doing better in attack than we were last season, certainly in terms of XG, if you care about that kind of thing. But defensively, we're not doing that well at all. And it shows. We're literally 10th. Yeah, and our goal difference is -2, and we've scored 9, which is hardly setting the world alight. But again, it's not just goals, is it? It's XG. Don't forget as well, we've missed 2 penalties. The XG on a penalty, I think, is like 0.7 or 8, I think, and we've missed 2 of them. So that shows you, you're underperforming your XG in that respect. And then we've conceded 11, which isn't good enough. I don't think anyone would say it is. So there's obviously work to be done. it's just how you interpret it. This is what I was saying earlier when we started the stream. It's whether you're glass half full or half empty. Or does it just show you United are still this work in progress under Ruben Amorim? We're just slap bang in the middle of the Premier League. Defensively, we're not good enough. Attacking-wise, we're getting better. It's not perfect. I still think we should be scoring more than 9 goals in 7 games, personally, as Manchester United, especially when you look at some of the fixtures we've had. But this is where we're at. It's frustrating. Look at Arsenal. Sorry, Arsenal's is better than City. I don't know what I was on about. That's goals scored, though. Sorry, actually slightly different. But Arsenal scored 14 goals and conceded 3. I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? Whereas you look at City have scored 15. They've scored the most, I think, in the league and conceded 6. Whereas Manchester United scored 9, conceded 11. Not good enough, I think, is how I'd term it. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you care about these things. What do you make of it all? What do you make of what you've seen this season? Because it's very weird, isn't it, at the minute? It's like we're in this sort of middle ground where some people just had enough and are angry and are fed up. Others are like, look, we've seen enough to give him a bit more time, Amorim, and to see what he's trying to do, and I'm impressed with the new signings. Let me know what you think. I want to hear what you guys have got to say. Mick Holohan says standards have been lowered since Fergie left. Sesko Lover says XG data is misleading. Manchester United, we are poor in everything. System is not working. Ron C says we has a great keeper who can actually catch in the keeper we trust. That's going to help. I know, that's not necessarily tied to XG, although it can be with distribution and things like that. But I do think that having a good goalkeeper and a reliable goalkeeper will help. Early doors on Son Lemons, but was impressed from what I saw against Sunderland. And just no massive clangers. I know there's one where he came out of his area a little bit haphazard, but there wasn't a big mistake that led to a goal, which... The bar is very low at Manchester United, but that's almost rare, isn't it? To be honest with you. This is a good point by Maurice Marshall. I think defensively, we are definitely missing Leacher. We are. We just are. And I can't wait to see Lisandro Martinez back in this team. And I think he's been sorely missed. And I think he fits well into Ruben Amorim's system. And you saw it just before he got injured. He was playing very well, creating and scoring goals as well from defence. God knows we could do with a bit more of that. There's a really good article in The Athletic from Charlotte Harper. Harper A. Says, I said that's completely irrelevant. I don't know. Says Brian Mbeumo's, let's start again. Brian Mbeumo's hometown of Avalon, Roxy Music fan, a population of just over 6,000, felt like the middle of nowhere. Gigantic field stretched for miles across the Burnley region. Like, the crux of this article, right, and I read it. It's behind a paywall, so if you haven't subscribed to The Athletic, I suggest you do if you can afford it, because it's really good. But we haven't, basically, it's a proper Athletic article, this. None of this clickbait, Sesko's the worst signing in the league, man. Proper Athletic articles are where they go to someone's hometown and they talk to their mates from school and they talk to the coaches that knew him when they were 10. That's a proper Athletic article. That's what I love. And this is one of those where Charlotte has spoken to people that were coaching Brian Mbeumo when he was a kid. She spent some time with his family, I think, watching the Sunderland game at home with them. He's quite close to his mum and his sister, and he comes across really well in the article. Everyone who's sort of talking about him talks about his progression as a player, talks about the maturity he had as a youngster, how he did develop, how he was good at all different sorts of sports, very good at cross-country running, very good, obviously, at football. He was phenomenal, but it just paints a very good picture of Brian Mbeumo, and I'm here for it. Because I like Brian Mbeumo, I really do. And it talks about some of the sort of milestones he reached. I think he scored 2 goals in the French Youth Cup final, something that I think Mbappe did as well. And then there was a bit in the article when it talks about when he was young, even when he was in attack, he'd be focused, he'd be watching the ball when it was down the other end of the pitch, switched on. Because a lot of youngsters don't, they switch off, don't they? When they're playing a game and the ball's in the other end of the pitch and they're the attacker, they might not be as sort of alert and aware, but apparently he was always ready. And always focused on the game, and it was really interesting, really good article. I know I'm waxing lyrical about it, but it was good. And they was talking about when they watched the game with his family and how his family were like, for the Sunderland game, I think he got an assist for that, didn't he, for Mason Mount's goal, and they're like, oh yeah, he got an assist, buzzing. But then they said overall, even though it's a win and he got an assist, he might be a little bit disappointed with his performance because, there was, I think he had a couple of shots that were off target, or I can't remember how exactly the game panned out, but anyway, they weren't just, it wasn't just pure adulation for Brian Mbeumo from his family. They're like, yeah, he did well, and there's some good parts, but he'll be quite self-critical, which is good. He just comes across really well. I've been impressed with Brian Mbeumo. I think he's going to do very well for Manchester United, and I think we're getting there with him. I think we are. I think every game you've seen a little bit more of the Brian Mbeumo we saw at Brentford. I really do. And I think he's going to really start hitting the dizzy heights soon. I'm looking forward to it. I like the way he plays. As you can tell, I'm a bit of a fan. Get involved in the chat and the comments. You don't have to have read that article. You can just let me know what you think about Brian Mbeumo. Doc Rock says, fun fact, Jay, Mbeumo and I share the same haircut. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, that's why I like him. Us baldies stick together. Jacoya Trot says, excellent positive article about a top player. Need more of this in the news media. I agree. Kevin Credible says, a winning goal at Anfield would make a great footnote to that article. It certainly would, wouldn't it? I'd absolutely love that. There's one in the Mirror. This isn't an article full of praise. So this is a little bit disingenuous, I think. So this is Tom Sunderland in the Mirror. And he's talking about Bruno Fernandes' worries emerge amid squad disagreement over Ruben Amorim. So, like, the short and long of this article, right, when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, it was talking about Bruno Fernandes and how in the recent game for Portugal, he didn't do quite as well as he usually does. I think one of the Portuguese accounts that they talk about gave him a 6 out of 10 rating and said that he looked a little bit fatigued. Also quite critical of Bernardo Silva. So it was like, Bruno Fernandes not quite playing as well for Portugal as he usually does. Is this a worry for Manchester United and should be concerned? Is he suffering from fatigue or whatever? What I will say to this, right, is you can't have it both ways. Because we have seen Bruno Fernandes be fantastic for Portugal so many times. His goal scoring record, his assists, his performances are so good. And yet, when that happens, a lot of the media just dismiss it when it comes to, well, that's nothing to do with United. That's just Portugal. That's just international football. What's that mean? Why are United fans getting giddy about that kind of thing? So you can't have it both ways, that when he plays well for Portugal, it doesn't matter, doesn't count. And when he plays badly, it does count, it does matter. I'm not having it. I think we'll see Bruno Fernandes turn up at Anfield. I really do. I like Bruno Fernandes. I know he's not been perfect this season. I mentioned the 2 penalties that he missed, which is quite unlike him, but he did score an important one at Burnley as well, against Burnley, which he had to score. I think that was a must-win game. And overall, I think he's done quite well this season. And in terms of his time at United, he's been fantastic. So, look, there's this debate going on with Bruno at the minute, innit? Should we have took the money in the summer? I think it's a quite a moot point because I don't think he wanted to go. I think it was actually up to him and he didn't want to go to Saudi. And I think he's right not to go to Saudi because I think he's still got a lot to offer, top-level football. And a player of the calibre at the age of Bruno Fernandes should not be playing in the Saudi League. He just shouldn't. So I understand that. But then you've got this system debate that is non-stop, where it's like, can you play Bruno in this 2-man midfield? Do you need someone else in there? All this other nonsense. Then it's sort of develops into this Manu versus Bruno thing and all this other stuff. And then it's like, should we have sold Bruno and got belabouring or Wharton? Or it just gets a little bit tiring, doesn't it? Look, I love Bruno. I hope he turns up at Anfield. I think he will, and we need him to, because if we can and are going to beat Liverpool or get any fun result, then we need a big performance from our skipper. Santa Notch says, the latest weekly media grift article about Bruno. Right, let's talk about what Peter Schmeichel's been saying in the Mail. I think this is. So I just wanted to use this as a sort of springboard to talk about Rasmus Højlund, because Rasmus Højlund's absolutely smashing it. We mentioned this last night. Peter Schmeichel saying that we shouldn't have sold him or thought it was weird. And we should not have let him go. He's been scoring loads of goals for his club and his country. The thing with Højlund is, it's difficult because there was a lot of people arguing that last season, and myself included, he didn't play well and he wasn't good enough last season, and that United had to bring in another striker or certainly come up with a better option because it just wasn't happening for him. And you know it wasn't happening when 17-year-old Cheeto is getting minutes. That said a lot to me, that. He's gone to Napoli and he's smashing it. Now, some might say, in true Oasis style, that we should have kept him and he should have been a backup to Sesko. The issue you've got there is, if you're Rasmus Højlund, how happy are you with that? Because if Sesko doesn't get injured, or if he's playing one game a week and he's a starting striker, then you ain't playing many games. And we've seen that. I keep going on about Manu. We've seen it with Manu. Manu is the backup to Bruno Fernandes, technically. Or back up to one of the other midfielders. He's not started a game in the Premier League. There's every chance that Rasmus Højlund wouldn't have had many starts in the Premier League this season. So is he going to be happy with that? If you just got a disgruntled striker who's like, what am I doing here on the bench? Or does he push Sesko a little bit? I don't know. It's just not ideal. I think the happy medium would have been to let him go on loan, see what he does, and then if he does really well, then possibly you could bring him back. However, we know what he did at Old Trafford last season. It wasn't really good enough. Even in his first season, I know he scored 16 goals, which is good, but there were peaks and troughs in that season. It took him a long time to get off the mark in the Premier League. And also, I think by the end of the season, he didn't even get a start in an FA Cup final, which says a lot. When you're not starting your star striker in an FA Cup final, now I know it works because we won, but I just feel like two things can be true. I know that's one of my favourite sayings, but Rasmus Højlund cannot have been good enough for Manchester United last season, and he can be good enough to go and smash it at Napoli, which he is doing. So I get the sentiment behind the article, but I think it is slightly flawed. Let me know what you think. Do you think we should have kept him? Do you think we should have had a loan move where he comes back? Do you think it was best for all concerned if he moved on? Giggity says it's a totally different league with teammates that get the ball to him. Danny Skywalker says he was happy with that. The club pushed him out. This is the thing about him wanting to stay and fight for his place. Kevin Credible says some players can't handle the weight of the United jersey. Simple as that. Steve Out says if Højlund was here this season, he'd be on no goals and assists to be fair. Right, let's talk about Michael Oliver. That was an old tweet of mine. Michael Oliver should be nowhere near refereeing United game, VAR or otherwise. I think this was on the back of the VAR decision at West Ham where Eric Ten Hag lost his job. That picture there is from Anfield. I think this was the season before last where Diogo Dalot got sent off for 2 yellow cards in quick succession. And this annoyed me because the second yellow card was almost immediately after the first one, and it was like he just spat his dummy out, Michael Oliver. It just felt like he was fuming and he just went like that. And then I remember watching the Villa game a few weeks later. The same thing happened with John McGinn, where John McGinn went mad at Michael Oliver, right to his face, nothing, didn't get a yellow. For me, it felt like he reacted. And I'm just not a big fan of Michael Oliver anyway. And I think there's a decent argument to be made that he shouldn't be refereeing Manchester United games. You can see him there in the Newcastle top. You might argue, Newcastle really are rivals. Well, Newcastle fans think they are. And there's this argument, isn't there, that, well, Michael Oliver, he's still the best ref. Is he? Is he? And also, you know what this reminds me of, right? Don't want to get all political. But this reminds me a little bit of the general election, right? Most people would say both the Tories and Labour are a bit crap. Yeah? And it was going to be one or the other, wasn't it? He was going to win the general election. Realistically, you might vote Green or SNP or Reform or whatever, but everyone knew it was either going to be the Tories or Labour who were going to be the next government. And I think people went, well, they're both a bit crap, but we've had 14 years of these ones and we know how crap they are. Maybe we just give the other ones a chance. And I feel like that's what it's like with referees at the minute at Anfield and with Michael Oliver. We know what Michael Oliver's about when he referees Manchester United games. He's not good enough. So why not give someone else a chance? You might not like all the other refs, but I think at least worth taking a punt on him because Michael Oliver, I think, is just not up to the job. I think there's serious questions about some of these extracurricular activities, shall we say, with refereeing and where he referees and who he referees for. I think the proof is in the pudding, what we've seen, some of his refereeing performances in big Manchester United games. I can go back even further. I remember when Joe Hart practically headbutted him and didn't get a booking. So I've never been impressed with Michael Oliver, and it always amazes me how people go, well, he's the best ref we've got. Really? Why not try and give someone else a chance in these big games? There's got to be a better option than him because far too often Michael Oliver becomes a talking point when it's a big game involving him and Manchester United, and he shouldn't be. He's got like main character syndrome. To be fair, my daughter's got it, but she's 8. He shouldn't have it in a Manchester United game. I'm not a big fan. Let me know what you think. You may disagree. I feel like I have this little rant every sort of year because every year we have Michael Oliver at Anfield. Sesko Lover says Casemiro will get a red card if he starts with Oliver as ref. Danny Sabu says don't get how you can be a Premier League ref while actively supporting a Premier League club. Rory King says Michael Oliver, more than any ref, makes the game about himself. I completely agree with that. I'm going to leave it there. Make sure, if you're not doing, you are hitting like, share and subscribe. I'm going to be back later on today. It's all happening today. We've got Off the Bar. We've got me, Joe, McCullough, Howson. Yeah, the Four Musketeers, we're all on that one. Then we're going to be looking ahead. Me and Joseph will look ahead to the Liverpool game. We're going to get that in early. We're going to have a look at the preview for the Liverpool game, a big game for Manchester United and for Ruben Amorim and for us fans as well. For me, it's the biggest game of the season, United-Liverpool. You may disagree, but that's how I look at it. So don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe. Don't forget as well to check out the merchandise, link in the description. I'm Jay Moyer. This has been The Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.